you need it, any way you want it.
Societal functions of third genders differ greatly throughout different cultures in Eastern and Western societies. For example, perceptions of third genders in ancient China contradict those in modern America. The reasoning behind this difference is greatly due to different moral conduct and values of the cultures. Their views are portrayed through gender roles, which are values that are deeply rooted in a culture. Gender, often misinterpreted, is a social construction that acknowledges ways that represents him or herself. For this reason, gender varies across several time periods and locations. Genders can be broken down into 4 subcategories: assignment, identity, roles, and attribution. Gender assignment is a cultural definition of fitting people into categories. This leads to social hierarchies and class distinction, as well as phallocentrism, which is the superiority of the male sex. Gender identity is an individual's self-expression. It is a way of saying, "This is who I am." Gender roles are shaped as a result of how people need to function so that they are perceived by their society as belonging or not belonging to a specific gender. Physical appearances, including the use of makeup, clothing choices, hairstyles, as well as speech and behavior, heavily contribute to gender roles of a culture. Finally, gender attribution is how others perceive someone based on their physical, behavioral, and textual cues. Altogether, the term gender is a loosely defined combination of these 4 concepts. It is commonly misunderstood that sex is the biological definition. When a baby is born, their sex is determined by a doctor, phallocentrically, meaning they are male until proven otherwise. Mostly, the distinction between a male and female is black and white, but the fact that 4% of babies are born with intersex is typically overlooked. Some common terminology is used in reference to the third gender throughout my project. First, intersex is when an individual possesses both male and female anatomical parts. Pseudohermaphrodite means having internal reproductive organs of one sex and external sexual characteristics of the other sex. A hermaphrodite is when both reproductive organs are present. A eunuch is a castrated male. A transgender is when gender identity and biological sex clash. And Brodacci is a man who adopts the dress and social roles traditionally assigned to a woman. What function do third genders serve in a society? In societies that do not have access to surgery or whose worldview is not mediated by biological facts of science, there is more space for those who don't fit the norm. These children are accepted as a third sex in the social order. We will be observing the roles third genders play in 5 different societies, beginning with the eunuchs in ancient China, to the hijras of Muslim India, to the guevidoche of the Dominican Republic, to the Brodacci and Native American Navajo tribes, to intersex in modern-day America. Eunuchs were castrated males who served as harem guards, palace menials, and spies in many ancient world kingdoms. They also were revered in the 18th century opera houses of Europe, having been emasculated as children to preserve their male soprano voices. However, eunuchs were the most historically significant and powerful in the palaces of imperial China. The custom of only allowing sexless men to serve the ladies of the imperial palace was deeply ingrained in Chinese thinking. The great power and societal reverence of the eunuchs consequently created them enemies. Researchers suggest that the scholar officials of the palace hated the eunuchs since they were personal attendants to the sovereign and were in a better position than even the most powerful minister to gain favor, exercise influence, and accumulate wealth. Hijras were hermaphrodite or eunuch, or sacred erotic female man. They include intersex people, assigned both male or female, but also attract a wide range of transvestites and homosexual prostitutes to their community. In India, hijras were in charge of overseeing the temple's devadasis, or maidservants of the goddess. They serve as dancers and courtesans as well. Hydras are said to have power to give blessings, so the Hydra traditionally earn their living by receiving alms and performing at weddings, at temple festivals, and at homes where a child, especially a male, has been born. The dharma of the Hydra is emasculation. The emasculation operation is called nirvana, or rebirth. Only after this operation can Hydras become vehicles of the goddess's power. Impotent as men and unable to reproduce as women, the Hydra are separated from normal family life and depend on religion and alms for livelihood. With the Hydra's place clearly documented in the Ramayana, the notion that the Hydras retained a special place in Indian society would not have been deemed as unnatural, but different, one that could not be contested, but merely accepted. The Guevedoche in the Dominican Republic were pseudo-hermaphrodites. The biological explanation for this condition is that while still in the womb, some male babies are unable to produce the testosterone, which helps external male genitals to develop. This biological classification caused many of these children to be assumed as female and were brought up as such. However, because they were genetically male, they began to develop male characteristics at puberty. These children were recognized and accepted as a third sex in Dominican society, and special corresponding gender roles were created to accommodate them. They did not serve any special purpose in this society, although they were not discriminated against. The Guevedoche is a perfect example of acceptance of a third gender without special treatment and social classification. One of the most humane and enlightened approaches was observed in the 1930s among the Native American Navajo people. During this time, American urbanization was in full swing and was beginning to face the consequences of its rapid growth and settlement. In the western U.S., Indian tribes were diminishing rapidly. Among them was the Navajo, and the acceptance of the third gender in their society, which is largely due to their lack of involvement in modern affairs, marks the end of such acceptance in America. The Navajo recognized three categories: male, female, and hermaphrodite or natal. Natals had a special status, specific tasks and clothing styles, and were often consulted for their wisdom and skills. The instance of the Zuni man-woman is particularly noteworthy. Although he looked and played the role of a woman, the Zuni man-woman was biologically male. He was a Bardachi, which the Navajo called two-spirited. He had a high status in his tribe, and was also able to attain high political and social status in modern America, where he was not accepted as a third gender. Modern America, or the Western world. In a region and time period where surgery is readily available and where gender roles are more popularly biologically determined, the third sex is not accepted as a part of society. In particular, this changed way of thinking began in the US and Europe in the late 1950s, when the practice of correcting ambiguous genitalia of intersex children became routine. Quite opposite from the ways of the Native American Navajo people, who would allow their children to decide their gender, by which stereotypical gender-specific items the child chose in an emergency situation, modern-day Americans began to choose the sex of their ambiguous children through surgery without their consent. In modern-day America, cosmetic surgery is used to normalize the appearance of ambiguous genitalia. It is admitted by surgeons to be an attempt to alleviate a psychosocial emergency rather than a medical one. Instead of offering intersex children and their families counseling to support them in accepting difference, doctors take this situation as a crisis in which they need to fix immediately with medical technology. In the modern Western world, ambiguous genitals are referred to as deformed before surgery and corrected afterwards. This medical classification sends a message to America that intersex people do not have a role in society and must be physically changed in order to be accepted.